Well, with me now to talk more about the pros and cons of becoming a member of the EU is Doga Eralp. He's a professor at the School of International Service at American University. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you, you're welcome. Now let's start with some background here. Given that the EU's original purpose was really about peace, unity and prosperity, even though most people now just sort of talk about it in the context of trade, just how desirable or valuable is it to be a member of the EU now?
It is desirable, but it's more about how to get to that level of prosperity. What happened in the EU over the course of the last 7 to 10 years, EU lost its track. There are two reasons for it. It's a democratic paradox, really. EU decided to reach out more to its citizens, and it turned out the citizens were not that happy about the EU project. And secondly, EU had a difficult time in defining its place in the changing nature of global politics and global economy with the rise of Chinese economy and now under the Trump administration, US turning inwards.
And we've also seen a lot of disagreements, obviously we saw with climate change, and then also when it comes to immigration, we see that when a lot of new countries do join the EU, sometimes people stay, but sometimes people, they flee because they're looking for better opportunities in some of these more prosperous countries in the EU. Which countries do new EU members tend to gravitate to?
Well, absolutely, that's a great point. The question is and remains still, where does Europe start and where does Europe end? So when they used to have these interviews with the Syrian refugees or Pakistani refugees trying to get to Europe, they weren't really that happy being stuck in Hungary. They actually wanted to go to Europe. So for them, Europe started in Germany, but not east of Germany, West Germany and north countries like Sweden, and even Britain, which obviously is now trying to get out of the EU. So the question remains, where does Europe start and where does Europe end?
Certainly an interesting point there. But still, as we know, countries are lining up still to join the EU. So talk about the difference between these candidate countries who are in this negotiation phase versus these potential candidates who are promised the prospect of getting into the EU under certain conditions or when they're ready.
Well, I got a lot to say about this. Me being originally from Turkey, Turkey has been waiting in the waiting room almost now like more than 5 decades, which by itself is quite tragic. But when you look into how many of these Western Balkan countries, how so much they desire to be part of the European Union, especially after the dissolution of Yugoslavia, we don't really see much of a progress besides the cases of Croatia and Slovenia. But I think the most tragic, obviously, is the case of North Macedonia. They recently, if you did remember, made a deal with Greece on the name change, which was obviously facilitated with the prospect of North Macedonia getting the green light from Brussels.
Right.
It didn't happen. Similarly in Albania, which now they actually go through their own political instability. EU accession perspective would actually provide much needed stability. Similarly in countries such as Serbia, Montenegro, their accession process is not necessarily moving forward. So I didn't even mention the cases of Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina. European Union is absolutely needed as a key player there, but EU is not necessarily being able to play out its what they call the strategic autonomy in the face of other actors, where you have the Russian and Chinese and Turkish influence in Western Balkans.
So then give us an idea, being that obviously countries like Turkey have been waiting decades, others meanwhile have gone ahead and joined. Just how rigorous is the process and how long does it usually take? Is it supposed to take?
Well, there are dozens of chapters. 36 chapters to be complete, and completion of these chapters by itself is not enough, obviously. All 28 members of the European Union needs to approve the conclusion of the accession process. Turkey is a special case by itself, so Turkey only managed to complete less than a handful of chapters, and it's due to the political reasons, actually, Turkey's candidacy is not moving forward. But countries such as North Macedonia, which could easily move forward quite fast in the accession track, is still not moving forward due to opposition from countries such as France and Netherlands, which absolutely are scared of their own opposition groups, primarily now the rise of extreme right populist ideology that is opposed to inclusion of newer members into the EU. So they want to keep their own constituencies happy as well.
And you're touching on some trends. Obviously, we're seeing this populist movement. You have this disarray with Brexit. You have now Switzerland engaged in an issue with its own partnership treaty. Given what's happening, what does the future of the EU look like?
Well, I think the main issue with EU cannot operate in two tracks. So EU cannot say goodbye to Britain and at the same time accept new members. EU, as the structure calls for, it could only act in one track. So, and the fact that you always have to have a consensus on whatever decision that needs to be made, that's why it takes painfully a slow progress. So yes, Britain may leave, but it's not sure which countries may get in. And EU countries are not yet set on who they're willing to take in.
We'll certainly be watching. Thank you so much. Always good to have you on. Professor Doga Eralp there of the School of International Service at American University.